Part 2 of my brand story. What am I all about? What influenced me and what gets me into the mood to do what I do now, and what influenced what I do now, which is social media ad producing, video, voice, and production, and all of that all rolled into one thing, Chris Jones Media. Now, part 1 of the brand story was talking about my interest in radio broadcasting and listening to the radio in the, in the 70s. Along come about 1980, backtrack 1 year. In 1979, about April, I ended up on a college radio station in upstate New York and started broadcasting what would be a career. Because a year later, I ended up with employment in the radio business. That started about a 13-year radio broadcasting career that went from Plattsburgh, New York, over to Burlington, Vermont, down into Ticonderoga, New York, which was fun, yeah. And then finalizing in Glens Falls, New York, where I still reside. I ended up getting out of radio in about 93, and that's the next part, part 3. Radio broadcasting started in Plattsburgh, and I remember the first few days, and a mentor named Gordy Little, and who's now passed. He left us 3 years ago now, 2016 was it? Time flies when you're, the older you get, the faster time goes by. So radio broadcasting has shaped what I do now, because that's where I learned to communicate and learned to enunciate properly, talk properly, learned what sounds good and what doesn't, and what people like to hear and how to communicate with people. That all came through my original mentor, Gordy Little in Plattsburgh at WIRY, 1340 on the dial up there, little 1,000 watt station, community news oriented and all of that. And they still do that. It's still a great station up there in Plattsburgh, New York. And from Plattsburgh, I decided I could have just stayed there my entire life, but I decided I was listening to radio stations over in Vermont, Burlington area, Burlington market, which is close enough to Plattsburgh so they can hear each other, but kind of a far ride by ferry or by bridge in Rouse's Point. But anyway, I moved to Burlington and met some people and worked at a station there and evolved a little more and wanted to go south. I just couldn't stay put. Ended up in Ticonderoga, and there's some people there. And by the time I got to Glens Falls in about 1984, I would say pretty well seasoned at that point, but you're never seasoned enough where you can't learn anything new. And there was a mentor down in Glens Falls by the name of Dave Covey at WWSC, which is still on the air, 1450 in Glens Falls, very similar to the Plattsburgh station. Now, all 4 of these locations all evolved my radio career, so to speak, and it lasted till about 93. About 1990 or so, I decided that, I don't know, I was getting tired of radio, I guess, at the time. And I decided to go into sales, actual sales, face-to-face, and had a bunch of things I was doing. At that point, radio kind of faded out. By about 93, I had done my last on-air radio show. But I have to credit radio with giving me the ability to communicate, ability to enunciate, and the inflections and the pausing and all that stuff that has brought me to where I am today as a social media ad producer and a voice talent and a personality, really. So that's where that is. And part 3 of my brand story will get into how I evolved from the radio to that helping me with sales, face-to-face communication, and further understanding how to communicate with people. That lasting all the way up into the early part of 2019. And we'll get into that in part 3. But for part 2, which is what this is, the radio career, I spent from 1980 to 1993, so about 13 years in broadcast radio. Fun, met a lot of great people, and depending upon where you are and what you do, it doesn't always pay the bills. I'll tell you that. But it was fun, and I learned a lot about communication. which is, again, a catalyst and kind of catapulted me into where I am today. So, all right, that's the Chris Jones brand story, part 2, raw video on Facebook. And I'll probably make a major production out of it and throw it up on YouTube. Thank you for watching.